will be Jim Cockrell. That's me. And I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning this afternoon. I'm the CubeQuest Challenge Administrator, and I'm going to talk to you this afternoon about the CubeQuest Challenge rules. Now, the way I want to do it, I have a lot of material to cover. We're not going to be able to obviously go into details about all 26 rules. I'm going to give you an overview. And the way I want to do it, we're already 5 or 7 minutes over schedule. So I'm going to talk for a solid about 20 minutes. And then I'll have 10 minutes for questions after that. So hold your questions until after I've gone through the talk. And then we'll see how many questions we can fit in before the break. We have another speaker scheduled, but we may defer that talk until later because we haven't confirmed with that next speaker. So either we'll have a break or we're waiting on the next speaker. So give me 20 minutes to go over the CubeQuest Challenge rules. First slide. These are the topics I'm going to cover. Everything in here is from I want you all to read this. This will be your Bible. And this is roughly in order that you'll find it here in this document. Next slide. This is the CubeQuest Challenge operations and rules. It's available on the CubeQuest website. I encourage you, implore you, and beg you all to download it and read it and become intimately acquainted with it. The overview I'm going to give is to give you broad brush ideas. I'm not going to be able to obviously go into details in all the rules. The rules could change. This is a stable document. We worked on it for over a year. Many people, a team of people that's large enough that I can't name all of them, have had inputs into the rule book. We've had 2 RFIs releasing earlier drafts of the rules, and we've gratefully received many comments and inputs into the rules. We've incorporated many of those good suggestions and changes. This is, as I said, is stable. The rules are dated December 4th. This defines how we're going to conduct the challenge. If for some reason unforeseen events or something comes up that we need to change the rules, it will be thoroughly reviewed within NASA. Any proposed changes to take place, we'll disseminate those proposed changes to the community. But they will be exceptions at this point. They will be because of unforeseen things that may come up. So you can download it today, and this is the final version, the baseline version of the rule book. Next slide. These are documents that are referenced in the rules, and they also carry the weight of rules. There are other documents that are referenced in the rules that I didn't include in this list, but these include either operational details or details about how we are enforcing the rules. And we'll, in the course of this talk, go over many of these topics that are included in these references. Next slide. There will be a panel of 5 judges who interpret the rules and are the final arbiters about compliance with the rules. Those judges are going to be let's call them the face of the CubeQuest Challenge. Tomorrow, Dr. David Klumpar is going to give a talk called Meet the Judges, and he's going to talk about how the teams will interact with the judges and what the judges do. This gives you an idea about that. But we can go into details when Dr. Klumpar talks tomorrow. Next slide. As Eric already mentioned, there are 4 ground tournaments. You don't have to participate in any of the ground tournaments. However, if you want to launch on EM1, you need to be one of the top tier winners of GT4, Ground Tournament 4. If you have your own launch service, you can still participate in the ground tournaments. They serve multiple benefits. They give the teams an indication about the progress towards the goals of the CubeQuest Challenge. They're an opportunity to win modest amounts of prize monies at each of the 4 ground tournaments. And they are also an opportunity to disseminate information about your mission design. So it's probably beneficial both ways for NASA to have insight into the team's development and also for the teams to receive those scores from the ground tournaments to determine that they're barking up the right tree. The ground tournaments are judged 40% of your score, a numeric score that's 0 through 5, is determined on your likelihood of mission success. And 60% of your score is determined by your compliance with the rules and with the interface requirements definition document of the SLS. You may ask why non-NASA launched CubeSats have to comply with the IDRD, the interface definition requirements. That's because we have to have a level playing field for all CubeSats. So mass and volume are constraints for a 6U CubeSat, but safety and other factors will have to come into play. So everybody needs to abide by the IDRD document. Then, of course, there's the down select for those that are going to fly on EM1, and then we proceed to the in-space competitions, the Lunar Derby and the Deep Space Derby. We'll go into details about that in the next slides. This is the notional timeline. The ground tournaments are roughly spaced at 6-month intervals. The first one is scheduled now. It's for the time foreseeable future, scheduled for August of 2015, and then they occur February of 2016. Let me get this year straight. February of 16, August of 16, and then February of 17. You can make teams A through D have decided that they do want to fly on EM1, so they're participating in some but not all of the ground tournaments. Team B didn't get selected for EM1, but A, C, and D achieved the winning scores and are able to get launched on EM1. Team X decided that they wanted to participate in GT2 and 3, but already planned to go with a third-party launch, and they can do so, and they can compete during the competition time frame. Team Y was an early bird and was launched early before EM1, but he only gets 365 days from the time of his deployment, the determination that he was deployed, until 365 days is his period of activities eligible for winning achievements in the challenge. Team Z was a late arriver, and he launched after EM1, but the whole challenge ends exactly 365 days after deployment from EM1. So that's the end of all activities eligible for the challenge. This is a lot of information in this slide, and we'll talk about details later. Next slide. This is the schedule that's on the challenge website. If you, I encourage everybody to go to www.nasa.gov/CubeQuest/details that has this schedule and much other vital information about the challenge. This schedule is very likely to change as time unfolds. We've got about 2.5 years between now and when the CubeSats need to be delivered for integration with EM1. A lot of things can happen, so if circumstances require us to change the schedule, that web page will be the live page for people to get the current version of the schedule. This is the one that's on there now. Next slide. We talked about eligibility, and rather than repeat that, you just corner us offline and we'll talk about team eligibility. But I do want to point out that teams need to submit their registration data package and mission concept registration data package at the very latest 30 days before the first challenge before the first ground tournament they want to participate in. So you can defer submitting your registration until the last challenge that you'd like to participate in. First challenge, I should say. That's covered in Section 5 of the rules, and there's other timing information in the rules. Next slide. However, if you want to fly on EM1, you've got to participate at least in Ground Tournament 4, and we're only going to select, when I say top tier, I mean if there are more qualified competitors who get at least a 3 or higher on GT4, and are compliant with all the rules, we have to down select to the number of slots that we have available to us offered by the SLS program. We know that we're going to have as few as at least 3 slots. There could be more, and that's why it says the top tier winners of GT4. The down select criteria is that we'll rank everybody based on their scores at GT4, and tiebreakers are broken by your average score over all the GTs if you've competed in more than one. So it'll be a ranking system. Go Government for, okay, so you may, this question came up, you may procure, you may use your own ground station, or you may procure DSN services or JPL navigation services. We're offering you the free ride, but other than that, you have to pay for any other government services that you want to take advantage of. We're going to talk about all of those services in future talks. I want to point out there's a representative from KSD, Kelvin, and I can't remember Kelvin's last name. Kelvin, do you have a hand? Are you here? Kelvin is in the back of the room, and he's glad to talk to you about the small payload integration and testing services that are offered by KSD. They've got a whole suite of systems engineering and integration and test capabilities that they can offer for a fee there at KSC if a team wants to take advantage of that service. See, Calvin. Next slide. So you have to, everybody has to comply with the SLS interface definition and requirements document. Only one CubeSat per team. The third-party launches have to provide, there's a data package that's mentioned in the rule book in that list of the supplemental documents that I talked about. That's so that we know that you've got a 6U size CubeSat, and we can, you've got the same mass and volume constraints as everybody else, basically. And that you're working safely and that you're compliant with all the regulations. As far as your limits for the communications achievements, you can use any part of the Ames spectrum for which you can get licensed. So we talked in the RFI with people who are interested in doing optical comm. That's satisfactory for the purposes of the challenge. If you choose to work with DSN, you've got to be compatible with their CCSDS compatible services. But other than that, if you have your own ground station, you're free to use whatever communications protocol as you are as you're licensed to use. And tomorrow, a representative from the FCC is going to talk about licensing the privately built space stations. So that'll be an interesting conversation to have. And next slide. We talked a lot about the ground tournaments and the timing of the ground tournaments. I just want to emphasize that the ground tournaments are scored with a numeric score. The judges are responsible for receiving all of the inputs from the teams. They confer with internal NASA subject matter experts, and then they provide scores that are based on a very specific judge's scorecard. And Mark Turner is going to talk to you about the judge's scorecard in a later talk, so you know what the criteria are for the ground tournaments. They're similar to, but not exactly like what you might find in a NASA design review. We wanted to walk a balance, optimize between too much rigor, too much business as usual, overly constraining, being prescriptive on the design requirements. But at the same time, we needed criteria by which we could judge the maturity and likelihood of mission success for the CubeSats. So this judge's scorecard is the document that we're going to use to guide the judges in their award of numeric scores. And we'll talk more about that. Next slide. We talked about there's at least 3 slots. You have to be compliant with the IDRD, and there's a down select there will be runners-up notified in case one of the top-tier winners of GT4 can't make it for some reason. Then we'll notify those who are in the batter's box as runners-up. Next slide. Here's the prize structure in a little more detail. So Eric told you about the prizes, and so there's basically 2 tracks. There's the lunar derby, in which you're competing from lunar orbit. You have to be into lunar orbit before you compete in the lunar derby. And the second track is the deep space derby. You have to get to 4 million kilometers range from Earth, and then you do your communications achievements from at least that distance or farther. So the conditions are summarized here. This is the deep space derby. The burst data rate is the largest number of 1024-bit data blocks in any 30-minute window. You choose which 30 minutes. The largest aggregate data volume is the most number of 1024-bit data blocks In any 28-day window, you choose which 28-day window. The longevity is defined as the last number of days between your first confirmed successful communications and your last successful confirmed communications. We don't care what you're talking about at the start or at the end of that communications. What we're interested in is that you demonstrated that your CubeSat survived that, at least that many days and communicated at least twice over that period of time. And finally, there is the farthest communications distance for the deep space challenge. That must be James, and I'm going to answer this and tell him to stand by. Hi, this must be James.
This is James.
Hey James, this is Jim, and I'm wrapping up my talk, and so I'll probably get another 10 minutes with Q&A, and then you'll be on, and I'll just leave the line for you.
Okay, so should I just stay online then?
Yes, please stay online, and then we'll get to you after our wrap up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll leave the line open so you can listen.
Okay.
And I wanted to mention that in case there's only one competitor that's able to achieve these conditions, there's a floor value for each of the prize achievements. So the floor value is shown. You have to at least meet this minimum or exceed it in order to be eligible for a prize. Next slide. It's the same, it's very symmetric for the Lunar Derby. So the communications achievements are quite similar. Prize values are slightly different, actually better for the Lunar Derby and the longevity challenge because of you have to maintain, you're not going to be near Earth, you're not going to use the Earth's magnetic field, you're not going to use GPS. So navigation is going to be an interesting problem to solve for a 6U CubeSat, so the prize amount for longevity in lunar orbit is a little bit, well, substantially higher. And the other difference is that we call it, the prize is called lunar propulsion, but I prefer to think of it as lunar navigation. Anyone who can at least do one lunar orbit, as defined in the rule book, gets a share of the $1.5 million prize. So that's a little different in that that's a prize that's split between anyone who accomplishes at least one lunar orbit. You get a slice of that $1.5 million pie. However, if only one competitor achieves a single lunar orbit and no one else does, that's capped at $1 million for programmatic reasons. Next slide. I'm going to breeze through the remaining slides and then I'll take about 5 minutes of questions. So there's definitions for competition start and end, and in a nutshell what it is the time that you receive from your launch service provider confirmation that you've been deployed. That may not be on the day of your deployment, but whatever that time is, that's the start of your first competition day. And everybody has exactly 365 days with respect to their respective deployment time. So obviously for all the EM1 CubeSats, they get 365 days from their mutual EM1 deployment time. The communications challenges all end 365 days from whenever your respective deployment date was. There's one exception. The longevity prize continues on, and it continues until 365 days after the EM1 deployment. So that's the only exception. Everything else you have a 1 year, maximum amount of time to do your achievements. And then everything ends, like I said, even if you're a late launch, the whole challenge is over 365 days after EM1 deployment. Next slide. There are requirements for ground stations. There's going to be a talk later about hiring the DSN for your use. You can use DSN as your ground station, but you will be charged for an aperture fee. Otherwise, you can make arrangements for your own antennas. There will be another talk later tomorrow about planetary protection, orbital debris, ODAR, orbital debris, somebody help me out here. Orbital debris assessment. What's the R stand for? Report. Report, that's it, thank you. Which is pertinent for low Earth orbit and end of mission plans, which is relevant both for end of missions in Earth orbit as well as for planetary protection. But we'll have subject matter experts tomorrow talk about those topics. There are policies that you can get again online that talk about what the content of those reports must be. Next slide. I talked about 10 24-bit data blocks and start and end times for the 28-day cumulative data and the 30-minute data bursts. There's a very specific format for the data that the CubeSats have to transmit. It involves having a random number seed that's given to the team members by NASA, and a time code that's embedded in the data that's downloaded from the CubeSat. Those requirements are documented in this supplemental document that's called Communications Procedure for Both In-Space Challenges, and tomorrow Steve Horan is going to talk in detail about those. Those are required because NASA needs to have visibility into, in order to enforce the rules regarding time windows, we need to know when you transmitted your data. And so that's the way we have insight into that. Next slide. Similarly, so that NASA is aware of your range beyond at 4 million kilometers and beyond, or that you've achieved successfully a lunar orbit, we will be doing, there is a protocol for navigation artifacts that must be submitted to the judges from the teams that will be used so that NASA subject matter experts at JPL can track your trajectory and determine that you've successfully made 4 million kilometers or that you've successfully entered lunar orbit. And there's a lot of details involved in what is comprised of, what those navigation artifacts are comprised of, and there'll be a talk tomorrow about that. I think that's the last slide. Next slide. So again, if you have any questions, you can reach me here, and we're running, how's my time? Oh, I have 5 minutes, so I'll take a few questions.
Yeah, so there is no scoring by priority, like by being the first to do any one topic. It's all going to be awarded at the end of the challenge. Is that correct?
I think I understood your question to say there's no awards until after, there's no prize awards until the challenge is over?
Yeah.
That's correct, because you can do, any team can do their communications achievements within those 365-day windows. And so we won't know, because the challenge prizes are written in terms of the best, the most, the longest, we have to wait until we've heard from the last competitor. So it will be either 365 days after EM1 before prizes are assessed and awarded, or sometime after we've heard from the last competitor for whatever reason, if it ends before that. So yeah, there won't be any prizes until after a year after EM1 is deployed.
And for getting into orbit, there's nothing about being the first to achieve. There's no.
Nope, you can get into orbit. For example, if you have a propulsion system capable of doing this, you could go to 4 million kilometers and do your deep space challenge achievements there, come back to the moon and enter lunar orbit, and if you achieve at least a single orbit, you get a share of the $1.5 million prize for getting into lunar orbit. It would be a good feat to see that. Question?
So related to the ODA, RSDO,
Yep.
are we going to be required either to crash our deep space mission or crash our lunar mission at the end of operation?
No, we want you to avoid contacting the moon because of, ideally, to protect the historical sites that are on the moon. There are detailed specific policies for lunar protection as well as general policies for planetary protection. And I'm trying to remember who's speaking to that tomorrow. Will be Cassie Conley will be calling in from NASA headquarters to talk in detail about those things. But it's not an intentional, as far as I'm aware, it's not an intentional crash, but she can give you more details about that. In the back of the room?
Yeah, Richard Blomquist from Red Canyon. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more of the longevity rule, specifically given the example that you just stated regarding doing both challenges. Longevity is it for, like, for example, the lunar part, does it have to be a contiguous amount of time that you're showing longevity, or could you do something special where you have longevity for a certain period of time and then you continue it on later, for example?
Yep. So the question is, how do you demonstrate longevity? Is that the question?
Basically, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to go at it, right?
Yep. So it's not that you have to operate continuously. The longevity here, for the purpose of this challenge, is defined as the elapsed number of days from the first peep that we confirm from your CubeSat until the day of the last peep from your CubeSat. And your CubeSat could go dormant for the whole period of time between those two peeps.
Okay, but if you did one of your peaks around the moon and then one at 4 million kilometers out, how would longevity be, the competition for longevity be considered in both of those?
So this is a good example of one of those unforeseen circumstances that could result in a change in the rules. I don't have a quick answer. I understand your question, which is we have different prizes for longevity at the moon than we do for longevity in the Deep Space Derby. So the question is, if you first talk from lunar orbit and then later from 4 million kilometers or reverse, how do we resolve the longevity prize? So is this something we probably need to get back to? Okay, so we're going to consult, and we have an official Q&A recorder here. Anyway, we'll take whoever is we'll record that question and get back to you. That's a good one. Are there any other questions? I have a couple of more minutes. Right there.
For the EM1 payloads, what kind of trajectory are you going to get dropped off?
The EM1 trajectory in which they'll all be deployed is called the translunar injection trajectory. There are Earth-centered coordinate navigational elements that have been determined by the SLS program for the secondary payloads that are going to be deployed from the upper stage of the SLS. And George Norris, or his representative, is going to talk to that from the SLS program. He can give you those coordinates now, and also online, if there are any changes to those coordinates, they'll be updated on the webpage. And one last question.
So, however you get to that point, whatever your launch system is, the boundary is that translunar injection point for EM1. So anything that gets you there, you're not counting the EM1 carrier as against your mass budget. It's released.
Oh yeah, it's just the CubeSat inside your dispenser.
Anything that gets you up to that point of that translunar injection is just treated as part of your ground launch infrastructure.
That's correct. The IDRD, the interface requirements document, speaks to the interior of the dispenser, and all of the 6U CubeSats have to be compliant with that mass and volume requirement that's specified in the IDRD. And so, however you are deployed from whatever your launch service is, it doesn't have any influence on the design of your CubeSat. They have to comply with the specifications of the 6U dispenser that's talked about in the IDRD. And again, George Norris or Scott Spearing will speak to that tomorrow and give more details about the deployer. So I'm going to turn over the stage at this time, and I know that there will be lots and lots of questions about rules, and feel free to contact me at this address. And I'm looking forward to an exciting and fun CubeQuest. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker.